Andrew Yang is a New York entrepreneur who's never held political office.
The first priority would be to implement $1,000 a month for every American adult.
Nobody knows who Andrew Yang is. You know, he's not a politician. He's like this outlier.
He's gone viral in a whole range of different communities.
I have done the math. It's not left, it's not right, it's forward.
I want to talk about everything with you. You can get on Fox News right now. You can get on CNN.
You're raising issues that nobody else is talking about.
Automation isn't going to slow down. What do we do about that?
I want to know how you think.
It's certainly not a new set of ideas. Martin Luther King championed universal basic income.
You've got the clout and the influence to be able to talk to anybody. Why did you accept this invitation to talk to me? I want to say hello to our entire student body and to tell you how excited I am about this particular opportunity that I have as Chancellor to sit and talk with some of the brain trusts that exist in our country today through a young man whose parents were Taiwanese immigrants, has come to the U.S., went to Brown University and ultimately Columbia University, graduating from both of them. Has a law degree that he doesn't practice anymore, moved more into the entrepreneurial lane of life, has had a wide scope, having run for president of the United States and for the mayor of New York. He has a plethora of experiences to share with us and a unique perspective on the United States. Would you please welcome Mr. Andrew Yang? Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me, Bishop Jakes. It's a privilege to be here.
I am excited to have you. I couldn't wait to talk to you. Let's roll the calendar back to the presidential campaign. And my first question is, having had a moment to run the campaign, go through the campaign, the political process, and then to back away and look at it for a little bit, in retrospect, what did you learn from it and what do you think about it?
My gosh, I learned so much, Bishop Jakes. I mean, I saw parts of the country I'd never seen before. And you and I were discussing before we hit the record button that I was running on ideas that were not mine. That I was championing universal basic income, which is a version of what Dr. King proposed before his assassination. And for the life of me, I don't understand why his ideas were dormant for so long, because the things he was concerned about in terms of inequality and poverty and other problems have just gotten much, much worse since then. So I ran for president on this idea that our economy is going to get even worse for most people because technology is going to come online that's going to kick a lot more people to the curb, and that we need to have universal basic income or some version of cash transfers as soon as possible. And the campaign itself was a real journey. I was not a household name, to say the least, like going into that campaign. And so I was treated a certain way by the press and by the Democratic Party. And for most of it, I had a pretty good spirit, because I was like, okay, I get it. These people don't know me and I'm new, and, maybe I need to prove myself or demonstrate my sincerity in some way. But after I came off the campaign trail, I started to dig into what I see as the structural problems around our politics. And there are a bunch. The part of it's the duopoly, part of it's the media, part of it is the fact that in this day and age, so many of us have lost faith in our government's ability to actually solve a problem or change something. And so we've kind of degenerated into arguments about values and statements and gestures, and people are just getting distracted all the time. So I've learned a lot, and I still have a vision as to how we can do better. But now I don't believe that my earlier path what is going to bear further fruit. Like I don't think that that the Democratic Party, frankly, would accept a lot of the big things that at least I would like to see changed.
So when you look at that, and we have two choices generally, sometimes three, between the Democrats and the Republicans, you started yet another party do you fear that your party, I think it is the Forward Party, will be portrayed as strong enough to split the ticket, but not strong enough to get elected?
Oh yeah, that's the main concern, I suppose. And so when I left the Democratic Party and started the Forward Party, I was a bit surprised at the level of acrimony and hostility, because I thought that that people frankly had a sense of what makes me tick, and that I'm not someone who's going to, for example, do something that I think is going to help Donald Trump get elected. like that. That's not so that it's not something that I would want to have like haunting me in my sleep at night. So there's a real need to change the structure of our political system. And here's the bind that people are in, Bishop Jakes. I'm just going to make a couple of assumptions. Let's say that you are someone who'd like to see some positive things happen. Let's call it, healthcare, education, universal basic income, like whatever the thing is. The Democratic Party seems more for those things than the Republican Party. The Republican Party now has, in my view, really lost its way and become something that a lot of Americans are deeply concerned about, and I'm concerned too. And so right now, a lot of people are like, well, you have to be a Democrat because, it's a lot better than the alternative. The problem is that the way our system is designed right now, the Democratic Party is not going to be able to deliver on these changes in the foreseeable future, as evidenced by what happened in California this past period, where California's Democratic led, dominated. Gavin Newsom ran for single-payer healthcare as governor, and then now he's in power and they have 2/3 majority, so they should be able to get it done, right? Wrong. But it turns out that when it came to a floor vote, they actually scuttled the vote. Like they never even voted on it because the healthcare lobby was too strong. The issue is that both parties right now are bludgeoning us by saying the other party is much, much worse. And nothing is really getting done in real life. And it's driving us crazy. It's pitting us against each other. So if you have that as your situation, what's the path out? And the path out is to make it so that you could have a third party or a fourth party emerge without messing it up for any one party. When you talk about the spoiler effect, most people think immediately about, let's say, Ralph Nader helping George Bush get elected because he might have gotten some votes in Florida. If you just tweak the system and make it so that you have something called ranked choice voting, then no party can mess it up for any other party, because you could just rank Andrew Yang 1 and the Democrat 2, and then not vote for the Republican. And then there's no chance that I could increase the chances of a bad person winning. So one of the things you and I talked about earlier was that people don't want to talk about solutions. Like a lot of people who were mad at me saying like, hey, you're going to mess things up with the Democratic Party. And then I respond, well, the entire purpose of the Forward Party is to make sure that no one can mess it up for anyone by having a better mechanism. And then there's like a lack of inspection. Where instead of people saying, oh, tell me more, like that would actually be great if people could vote for whoever they wanted. No one has to worry about empowering the bad guy, whoever the bad guy is in this case. But they want us to remain stuck. They want us to remain hostage to the fact that, well, you have no choice but to vote for us because the other team is much, much worse. Why not have a third team, a fourth team, a fifth team? Why not have a team that reflects your values? And you know what that would do? That would create genuine competition for the Democratic Party to actually deliver, for the Republican Party to maybe get its act together and not get overtaken by very, very negative elements.
Well, let me push back a little bit. The former CEO of Starbucks had a similar idea and decided to run independent. And when he announced his candidacy, he was brutalized. I happen to know him. He's a brilliant guy, very, very smart person. Walked away from Starbucks in part to see if he could solve some problems for the country. And he really, there's an old adage that says, he who stands in the middle of the road gets hit by both sides. As you start this party from the ground up, how do you avoid the antagonism from both sides that would be the undertow that would end up splitting the ticket, actually? How do you avoid splitting the ticket and actually get taken seriously? You had trouble getting taken seriously as a candidate as it was with the Democratic Party. How do you plan to overcome the objections of the system that has hyperventilated any real progress?
You know Howard, I know Howard too. We need to get Howard.
He should be on the interview with us.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We should get Howard as as a guest.
I think Howard was shocked. I think he was shocked just from the look on his face. I haven't talked to him since he ran, but Howard Schultz was shocked to find out that, in fact, I think he thought he was going to be well received and they would be happy to have the alternative, and they were not. How does history then inform your decision for the Forward Party?
So what happened to Howard is very much a product of what I'm describing, where there is like an entrenched part of both parties, truly, where they want to have power and control. And so if someone comes up and says, hey, like I'm running too, and like I'm not as terrible as the other team, like then like as in Howard's case, then the knee-jerk reaction will be to drag that person down as quickly as possible, because you don't want genuine choices for people. To the extent that I think Howard should be engaged in a big way is around process changes like ranked choice voting and nonpartisan open primaries that would open it up. Because it's really funny, Bishop Jakes, it's like within a closed system, like let's say it was Joe Biden, Donald Trump, and Howard Schultz, then people getting mad at Howard Schultz because he might increase the chances of Trump winning. It's like, okay, in a way that's very, very sensible and legitimate and rational. But what about just tweaking the system where, again, if you had ranked choice voting, then Howard could stand there and be like, look, I can't mess anything up for anyone. And then people will not, again, be excited about that, but they'll be like, oh, great, I get more choice. Instead, it's very much like, no, like you're messing things up. And so there's something that's not terribly solutions oriented or even rational about the way Howard got treated.
Well, the margins are so thin when we do have a winner that even Kanye West was talking about getting in the game. And that was welcomed because it fit right into the philosophical idea that if you can skim off any votes at all, it will further weaken the process. I wonder when you look at, my frustration is, I wonder if anybody, president, can do any good in the environment that we're in right now, where the two parties are having a civil war in Congress, in the House, in the Senate. There's a civil war going on.
That's exactly right, Bishop Jakes. And this is one of the things I dug into in my latest book, Forward, which led me to start the Forward Party. So you look at Congress and you say, hey, can't get anything done because there's a civil war. You are 100% correct. And you are correct because it turns out the incentives for individual members of Congress are completely independent of what happens to us, people, communities. Turns out what happens to us, irrelevant. And these are just numbers. Right now, the national approval rating of the US Congress is something like 25%, really low, everyone unhappy. The re-election rate for individual members of Congress is about 94%. If you're a sports fan, that's a better win percentage than the Jordan era Chicago Bulls. It's like, if you're an incumbent, you're the Bulls. Right. So you get in there and you have nearly absolute job security because 83% of the districts in the country are either very blue or very red. So if you get to the general election, you win. It's non-competitive. The only thing that will keep you from getting to the general election is if you get primaried by someone who's more extreme in your own party. So the entire game after you get elected is avoid getting primaried, which means if I have a choice between being on my side and saying, hey, the other side's terrible and we're not going to compromise, or trying to get something done, I'm going to stay in my corner, because if I get something done, I'm going to get attacked, I'm going to get primaried, my job security goes down. So the way the system is built, it's going to make us all crazy because nothing's going to happen. Each side is going to say it's the other side's fault. No one loses their jobs. No one's accountable. And that's the current situation by the numbers. That's why we should expect this to get worse, not better, unless we actually change those numbers. I'm the math guy. I like to think of myself as like, America's math guy. I don't know if that's accurate.
It sounds good. It sounds good.
Yeah, I used to have a math pin, make America think harder. It was like the opposite of, the other guy's thing. So the numbers say that the incentives are all messed up for members of Congress because they're not actually accountable to 51% of the people in their community. They're only accountable to the 10 to 15% who vote in the party primaries. And so their goal is just to avoid getting primaried by someone on the extreme.
What are your thoughts about SCOTUS and the current nomination process that suggests that perhaps there may be an African-American woman that is considered for that position? Is that relevant? Does it really make a difference? What are your thoughts about it?
I think if it were me, if I were president and I was in this situation, I think I would nominate an extraordinarily excellent qualified Supreme Court justice who happened to be a Black woman, and then leave it at that.
Right. Well, my concern is not going to change the dynamics of the court. We still have a court that's dominated by conservatives more than liberals, and this appointment, though it is historically relevant and makes me as an African American very proud, I just wonder at the end of the day, will it really matter when it comes to the court's decisions?
Oh, it totally won't, because she's replacing someone who is on the left, really. And so you just swap a liberal vote for another liberal vote. But one of the problems we're facing, Bishop Jakes, is that we're getting wrapped up in what Cornel West, I think, called like different faces in high places.
That sounds like him.
Yeah, it's like if you put in someone else, like it'll make some of us feel very happy and proud. But as you're suggesting, it like the court's policies will remain essentially the same.
I am also the CEO of TD Jakes Foundation, and our foundation is geared toward job creation, financial literacy, STEM programs, STEAM programs, and trying to be a bridge between CEOs and those in underserved communities so that they can find better choices, better selections, better opportunities on both sides to climb up the ladder and be a part of the American dream as opposed to the American nightmare. When you look at STEM and what was happening already in our country was pretty gloomy for underserved communities, minorities, Black and brown in particular. Over the next 10 years or so, more and more we're going to drop below the poverty line. I can't talk. The poverty line, largely because technology was going to replace the jobs that were attainable by non-degree people. Now here comes COVID, which in my view exacerbated the problem, sped up technology, took us quicker than we wanted to go into a world that we may drop even faster than ever before. Am I right about that? And what are the solutions, if there are any, to this problem?
You are 1,000% right, Bishop Jakes. COVID has made a very nasty situation worse. People of color are being hit the hardest. I just saw a statistic that blew my mind in a very, very heartbreaking way, which is that about 15% of male community college students dropped out over the last 18 months. And you know that they were disproportionately people of color who are trying to find a foothold in the economy. So we've made a tough landscape even tougher, and it's going to get worse. COVID has given companies license to invest billions of dollars in automation because they just shrug and say, well, it's good for business. And at this point, people don't want to see other people. People don't want to interact with other people. People don't want to be in the office. So I'm just going to completely turn on the AI. So we have to go much, much bigger if we're going to keep our society from disintegrating. We're seeing terrible, terrible outcomes for a lot of people. When I was running for president, I talked about this as like a metaphorical storm or water line, and the water levels going up. and the people who are on the lowest plots of ground tend to be people of color. So we have to be much bigger and bolder about what we could do. My starting point, and this is something that I'd love to dig in with you about. It's like I spent 6 years running an entrepreneurship nonprofit. I'm all about trying to empower people, enable people, connect them to opportunities, and it sounds like your foundation is doing the same sort of work. At the same time, you realize that the weather is turning against you, and then you think, okay, like we're going to continue to do our excellent work, but we also are going to need to think bigger about solutions that make it so that maybe the jobs like don't look quite like the jobs that currently exist, or there are more resources coming in. That's why I ran for president, truly, is that I began to despair that my nonprofit's work was not going to be able to address the true needs.
Well, the reason we went from STEM to STEAM is that the latest stats suggest that when you include the arts, it's kind of like a way to entice minorities into technology, whether it's production, whether it's graphic arts designs, working behind the scenes. It's a way of getting them involved in coding, getting them connected at the earliest of ages. Arts is kind of a gateway drug to STEM. Having said that, and sitting on the board, the governor's board for Dallas Symphony Orchestra, it's a hard pull up a tough hill. And I think a lot of people are doing a lot of smart things to try to resolve it. But my fear is too little, too late. Can we bring about the change with having summer camps for kids?
Now, we have to continue to invest in and do all the things that we can. At the same time, I agree with you that we should be doing much more and thinking bigger. So here's the way I've thought about it, that you have this ruthless capitalist system that's getting more and more ruthless. And one of the things we do is we try and prepare people to succeed within that ruthless system, to say like, hey, maybe you can get these skills and you'll be able to get a great job. We should totally do that. And at the same time, ideally, we would take this system and make it much more human, much less ruthless, much more family oriented, much more community oriented. Now, how can we do that? And the way to do that, in my view, does involve the federal government. And it's a painful reality because just the way I think about things as the math guy is, look, you have a $22 trillion economy. It's turning on more and more people. The stats are terrifying. The stats for men are particularly terrifying. And so if you wanted to try and change this stuff, root and stem, you would need to get the only actor that's capable of turning a $22 trillion ship meaningfully, the federal government, which is why I ran for president, and it didn't work out. But it did work out, but it didn't work out. You guys know what I mean. So I still have the same vision, which is, okay, $22 trillion economy, failing more and more people. How do we get it under control and, start rebuilding the society that we all know we need, where people can flourish, frankly, Bishop Jakes, whether they're great at coding or not. You know what I mean? Like, we should be trying to make more people great at coding, but we should also be like, you know what? A lot of people aren't going to be great at coding. Like, you should not have to be great at coding to live a good life. Right. So that's still the mission. The thing I've realized is that when you start getting to DC, and you probably spend more time in DC than I have, but DC is very, very heavily institutionalized, entrenched. The parties are very entrenched. They each have these media organizations that are kind of maintaining order in a particular way. They're maintaining order, by the way, by, as you know, just like
by keeping chaos.
Yes, by like inflaming people against each other.
Right.
And so this is the picture, but still, in order to make things better for the communities that you're serving, I still think we need to get control of the behemoth, the Leviathan. And then we need to say, look, let's do some dramatic things like, Dr. King's version of a basic income, or my version of a basic income, or and so one of the things that I heard all the time when I was running for president, which annoyed me a little bit, because it's like, well, I don't really think that, where people are like, hey, Yang, jobs are about more than the money. You need structure, purpose, fulfillment, community, all of these things. And I totally agree. I want to give people money so that we can start to create these thriving ecosystems of different kinds of opportunities in people's communities, so that instead of feeling like, okay, we need to train you for this job at Amazon that, by the way, is just going to get harder and harder, and then they're going to get rid of you.
Right.
That we can have a community that is itself prosperous. People have money to spend on each other's things. And then if I decide to start something that helps kids in that community, it can be a successful business. If I decide to start a bakery, it can be a successful business. Like, just try and create that environment. Again, big vision, big thoughts, but we have to try and do both things at once.
Big vision, big thoughts, great ideas. Who pays for it?
Amazon would be the shorthand, but
I mean, with a country that's already overladen in debt, up to our ears in debt to other countries around the world, burning money as fast as we can make it, juggling with the interest rates, trying to pull things together. You start talking about giving $1,000 or so a week to every
a month, but yeah, continue.
a month, a month to every person. 300 and some million people across the United States. The question immediately jumps up at you: are we going to raise taxes? How do we pay for it?
So I referred earlier to Amazon, and when I was running for president, Amazon was paying essentially zero in taxes, despite being $1 trillion company. And one of the jokes I would tell on the trail was, "Hey, if I were to increase the tax rate, how much more do we get from Jeff Bezos in terms of personal taxes?" And people think about it for a second, and then eventually come up with zero, because most of his wealth is in Amazon stock, and he's not dumb enough to pay himself a large paycheck that we're going to tax. So in my view, we should be getting a toll from the Amazons of the world that they can't squirm out of. And this is particularly true as AI gets more powerful, because if AI replaces, let's say, 200,000 call center workers, which it probably will. The call center workers, there are 2 million call center workers in the US. So 200,000 is low. Like you could say 1 million or 2 million. The 2 million call center workers, for the most part, pay taxes. Like, how much will Google pay in taxes on its AI taking those jobs? And right now the answer is next to nothing, because Google has operations, internationally, and it'll just funnel it through a tax haven, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we have to change. When you ask, where do we get the money? We get the money by taking a toll from the giant tech companies, for starters.
When I look at my long form tax form, I think I work for Uncle Sam. We're almost a limited liability partnership. By the time I pay taxes, I'm paying almost 40% taxes just to keep my head above water. And when I hear that these guys who are billionaires are getting by with nothing at all, make that make sense to me.
Yeah, it's a really dumb system, Bishop Jakes. So I will explain. All right, Amazon's the easiest one to explain. So Amazon's $1 trillion company to sell everything under the sun. So you'd think, okay, we should be getting a lot of taxes from them. But what they do is they make it so that their company in the US doesn't actually report a lot of income in any given year. So their corporate income tax is close to zero. They'll issue stock compensation to their employees and make sure it's not taxable. They'll make sure any earnings that do happen go through Ireland or the Cayman Islands, not taxable. So at the end of the year, they're like next to nothing in taxes. Jeff Bezos, worth, I don't know what the number is now. He got divorced, so now he's only worth, I don't know, 60 billion. I don't know what the number is.
Once you get that high, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. But so if he were to pay himself 10 billion in compensation, then he'd be like you or me, where he'd have to pay, 30-40% of that in income. He would never do that. He probably pays himself a salary of like a few million a year just for fun. And then he has all this stock on the side that he's paying no taxes on. And then every once in a while, he'll sell some stock, maybe. What a lot of these guys do, Bishop Jakes, is they'll start like various donor advised funds, and then they'll donate the stock to it, and then they'll funnel their money in different ways. So Jeff Bezos individually, I don't know his tax rate, but I'm sure it's quite low. Amazon's corporate tax rate is next to zero. I'm like you, where I ran an LLC. And in my case, I ran it in New York City. So I was paying 48% in tax. And I remember going to my accountant being like, hey, are you doing something wrong? Am I doing something wrong? Like, what's wrong with this picture? And he was like, no, this is just the
I've had that conversation. So I can really relate to it. Let's play Weatherman for a minute. For the benefit of our audience, let's forecast what 20 years from now looks like for African Americans on the track that we're on right now. Let's give them the forecast.
If nothing changes, I said this to a large group of Black people at a a NAN gathering, where if you look at the numbers, things are getting worse for Black people and Black communities. Your net worth is trending towards zero and negatives, and that's not right. And we should do everything we can to turn it around. But it was the metaphor I described, where there's a hurricane coming, it's already here, and you live on the lowest pieces of land. And so when you come back in 20 years, what is that land going to look like? It's going to be underwater. What are those towns going to look like? They're going to be underwater. So we need to think much, much bigger about what we can do to make it so that the shelter rises.
Deeper. Let's go into why those numbers are going to bottom out at zero over the next 10 to 20 years. The underlying factors.
Yes. So our economy has made it so that the return on education is just getting more and more competitive. So it used to be, if you were a high school grad, you get a job in, let's say, manufacturing, and you could live a middle-class life and be fine. Now, not happening. So then you're like, okay, maybe community college, maybe four-year school. Four-year university is incredibly expensive still. And your job prospects out of you come out of a university are actually dimmer than they were like a number of years ago. So the costs are higher, the prospects are worse, but you still don't have a choice but to go, because the prospects are even worse if you don't have this degree. So Black families are more likely to borrow lots of money to send their kids to school. They come out, their job prospects aren't as good as they should have been. And then you have this AI buzzsaw that's going to come and cut everything off at the same time. And the AI buzzsaw is going to affect anyone who's doing redundant manual work or redundant cognitive work. So some people think, well, if I'm in an office, I'm safe. No, that AI is going to do away with insurance agents, with journalists, with different workers in different fields. If accountants, like bookkeepers used to be a thing. Now bookkeeper is not a thing. So technology is going to do a number on a lot of these jobs, and unfortunately, they're going to be jobs that are more likely to be occupied by people of color.
Well, right down to in the airport, more and more machines, less people. Grocery store, more machines, less people. Every time I do a checkout through a machine, I realize that machine used to be a person. That person had a family. So it's not just that person that lost a job, but that whole family lost a source of income. Crime is going up, violence going up, domestic violence going up, hostilities going up. Everybody's coming up with these solutions for crime. I think the greatest solution for crime is a great job. I've never heard of anybody had to mug somebody who had to go to work in the morning. So if we don't fix the economy, then we're putting Band-Aids on crime, and crime will go back to being big business again. Our criminal justice, I don't even want to get started on that, and the chaos and the craziness that goes on disproportionately amongst people of color. But let's be clear about this. This is also the Rust Belt, the so-called Rust Belt states, the white blue-collar workers who have worked for years, who also galvanized around the MAGA movement because they were ready for change and were very, very frustrated. And they also voted for Obama. They were ready for change. They went from Make America Great Again to Together We Can with the flick of a pen. And they're still angry because they were the people who worked in industries. And they were the people with a high school diploma or 2 years of college, worked in the industries during the industrial age, lost everything in the information age, technological age, have not come back, having to live like minorities. They're outraged. And whenever people get angry, they need somebody to blame. They're blaming immigrants, they're blaming blacks, they're blaming Jews. Violence amongst races is going up. So we've got sociological chaos. If we keep down the track we're going right now, will there even be an America?
The two most likely scenarios in 2024, in my opinion, are that I think Trump will be the Republican nominee, and I think that Trump is going to be a real contender, unfortunately, for the presidency. And if he were to prevail, you would see widespread riots and protests around the country and protest, and then there'd be, violence. There's also a chance that he runs and loses and then declares victory, and then you'll see a different kind of protests and riots and violence. I'm deeply concerned about the prospects of our democracy making it through the next number of years. Institutional legitimacy is fading very, very fast. It's one reason why I am so happy to be here with you, in the sense that there are leaders like you that are just doing the work and trying to make good things happen. And you have the trust and love and adoration of a lot of people. Unfortunately, right now, our civil society is torn in two, where there are people that are loved and adored in some quarters and then completely despised in others. No, this is going to come to a head because you truly have this fissure. Now, my plan, which you start out, and most people have a deep skepticism of third parties, and I get it. But I want to suggest that, if this is the reality, and our very democracy is at the tipping, at the edge, which it is. Imagine if you had a critical mass of, let's say, 4 senators who were from this kind of compromise party, who then could get things done with one side or the other, which, by the way, would make it so that each side would have to all of a sudden become much more with it, because they're like, wait, I can actually get something done if I decide to do these. It would introduce a higher level of accountability, because I can't just blame the other side. I can actually work with these 4 people. And in a polarized country, Bishop Jakes, you don't need 50% in the middle. You need, 5-10%. I mean, if you had 4 U.S. senators right now that were third party, that third party would control the entire legislative agenda. In the House of Representatives, the number would need to be a bit greater, because it's not literally tied. So this is one way that we can help manage this oncoming potential civil war that lies in front of us. We can bring the temperature down.
My analogy might be off course, but it kind of reminds me of the scenario with Senator Manchin. All of a sudden, because we are so close in numbers to being divided, his decision determines which way we go. Are you saying that a third party is going to be the equivalent of a Senator Manchin, that because we are so equally divided, that it only takes a certain amount of numbers in a third party to lead the country out of the chaos? Is that basically what you're saying?
Well, let's say hypothetically that Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins were third party instead of 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans.
Okay.
They would all of a sudden be the hinge where, if either the Democrats or the Republicans came to that group of 4 senators and said, hey, what do you think of this plan? What do you think of this idea? You could get a majority. You could pass it. I want to say on the record, I disagree with Kyrsten Sinema's preservation of the filibuster. I think you should get rid of the filibuster, particularly for a lot of these voting issues. I disagree with Joe Manchin scuttling the child tax credit and a lot of things that I believe in very, very strongly. But that's independent of the political reality that if you had those 4 senators as an example, then you would see a very, very different set of structures. And I believe you would see more getting done.
Well, the average person that's going to listen to this can't do anything about any of the things that you're saying. They're not going to run for office. They're not going to be president. They could join a third party if they so chose. But let's bring it to the kitchen table of America. If you had a child, young man, young woman, you were raising today, and you wanted to ensure that they had a viable chance and opportunity at a bright future, where would you direct them?
I am a dad. I've got 2 boys who are 9 and 6. I'll describe them for a moment, just so maybe some people will see themselves. They just cannot get enough of video games, being online. It makes me feel bad, honestly, because I grew up in a different time, and I'm just like, oh, am I a failure as a parent? They love Roblox so much. I don't know if anyone watching this can relate to any of this. So there's part of me that's like, okay, maybe leaning into that would be positive. then more of me is like, hey, I don't think this is going to lead anywhere good. I think it would bring us back to the arts, Bishop Jakes, and that one of my friends who's an educator showed me a study that said that being involved in the arts and high school drama and other things is one of the most powerful indicators of your confidence, your interest in school, your seeking out higher education if that's what you want to do. I'm not someone who thinks like a particular course of study is going to keep one safe. I mean, if you're going to be a coder engineer, that's great. And like it likely will lead to good things. But I'm not someone who says like, hey, everyone should try that, because I just don't think it's realistic. I mean, even for me, like my dad was a physicist, and like I went to law school and studied economics. So
Right.
But the main thing that we can do for our kids is what you do every day, which is make them feel loved, make them feel supported, make them feel confident, make them resilient, make them gritty, make it so that if they go down a particular direction and it doesn't work, they'll be able to pick themselves up and go down another direction. That's what has fueled my career. I've switched careers a few times. I've had my fair share of failure too. The single biggest thing we can do is make our kids able to withstand a failure and then get back up and keep going, being the sort of person that other people want to work with and build something significant.
When you invest in entrepreneurs, and I'm just making the assumption that you do, you're an entrepreneur yourself, what do you look for?
The main thing I look for, it's character and commitment. I think there are times as an investor, and I'm a bit of a softie this way, and this makes me in some ways a very subpar investor, but I'll invest in people just because I'm like, man, like I just want this person to have their shot. I'm not even sure this thing is going to work, but like I believe in this person. And then if the person fails and says, hey, didn't work out, and as long as they were above board about it, I'll be like, it's fine. Like I'm that kind of investor or advisor, maybe because I've been there and I've failed. So I'm like a character and commitment type, where if you feel like someone's going to push, and go about it the right way, then you believe. I'm also not someone who, and this differentiates me too. Like the entrepreneur always knows best, in my view. They ask me for my opinion, I'll tell them, but like they know what's going on more than I do. And I know that from my own experience when I was an entrepreneur, I could not stand it when someone was always just like telling me what they thought, because most of the time they didn't know as much as I did. Because, I'm staring at the business every day. Like
Right.
they're just a smart person who gave me some money.
Yeah. Okay. Let me ask you a question. You can be talking to anybody. You can get on Fox News right now. You can get on CNN. You can get on MSNBC. You can get, Bloomberg Report. You name the ticket. You can get on it. You've got the clout and the influence to be able to talk to anybody. Why did you accept this invitation to talk to me?
Because you're a great purpose-driven leader, because you're trying to elevate people and do the right thing. And you also struck me as both intellectually and spiritually rigorous and honest. And these things are not commonplace, honestly. Honestly, you're like a very important singular figure. So, when you ask like, why, I feel thrilled that you invited me. I would love for you to consider me like an ally and friend to anything you want to see happen in the world.
I would like that. I would like to continue our relationship, our dialogue, our conversation. I think you have a very unique perspective that is important, an authentic perspective, which I really bank on. Authentic ideologies are very, very important rather than just saying whatever you think will get you elected. We have too many people right now who are devising a strategy for electability that they don't even believe in. They're just doing whatever they need to do to get their constituency behind them and win the power to get the base. Let me steal just one or two more quick questions for you.
Of course.
Russia, China, all galvanizing. We're galvanizing with NATO, just sent troops out. We've got a crisis brewing in the Middle East that could lead to World War III. If you were president, what move would you make right now? We're playing chess.
Yeah, I think responding to Russia's potential hostility towards Ukraine is imperative and important. You can't have countries feeling they can invade other sovereigns. You don't want the USSR to be reconstituted. Russia has done some very, very hostile and nasty things to us, including undermining our elections recently. So I would be very responsive. I will confess that my main concern is just how weak and vulnerable we have become at home. We're falling apart, and we have to make meaningful investments in ourselves, our communities, our families, or else we're going to see our strength abroad dissipate anyway. You know what I mean? Like if you're not strong at home, you're not going to be strong anywhere. But I do think that Russia can't be allowed just to invade a neighboring country.
I agree with you. My final question is cybersecurity. If Russia can tamper with our electoral system, if they can hack into Sony, if China or somebody can hack into Sony, if Japan, doesn't matter what the country is. If we are that vulnerable, we have no real legislation. Cyberspace is, to me, the Wild Wild West. It's not regulated to any degree. How do we continue to support innovation and creativity and yet bring some regulatory rules that stop social media from the cyberspace from being a conduit for misinformation and our privacy all being invaded every day and nobody's doing anything about it?
This is one source of frustration for me about our government, Bishop Jakes, is that we are so far behind the curve. It is laughable, embarrassing, and it's becoming destructive and corrosive. And when you look at the problems in our society and our government and our politics, a lot of them are being made much, much worse by social media. I'm going to go on a limb and say it's almost impossible for us to solve a number of these problems if you don't get social media under control. The problem is that our political figures don't understand social media in the least. And when they're concerned about it, they're concerned about it for ideological purposes. They're like, hey, my side's getting censored. It's like, hey, that's not really the deepest problem here. The deepest problem is that Russia and China are like turning us against each other. An expert told me that a number of the most highly trafficked Christian accounts on Facebook are bots. Where they just and some of those bots were started by foreign actors. So the business model of Facebook is revenue. Like that, they don't have any counterweight, whether it's the mental health of our kids, whether it's our democracy, they don't care. And they've been running circles around our government for eons. And if I were president, I was going to go to war with the social media companies, truly. I was going to bring them to heel. I was going to tell everyone that's invested in them, like, hey, if you think that you're investing in companies that are going to have a license to print money at the expense of the wider society, like the license is ending. So get out now.
Oh my gosh, man. I could talk to you all day. I keep saying the last question reminds me of preaching a message. I'm closing. But it occurs to me the headlines today suggest that houses of worship everywhere need to increase security, that we're getting threats. The synagogue recently here in Dallas almost had a horrible experience, almost could have lost their lives if it were not for the very grace of God and the quick move of one of the leaders over at the synagogue throwing a chair, and they escaped out the building. Now we're getting more death threats targeting religious institutions, wanting to do mass murders and killings in sanctuaries. A lot of our students are students of divinity and upper level education for theology. Why? Tell me why houses of worship? Why not football stadiums? Why not Broadway plays? What is it about houses of worship that make them an attractive site for terrorists whether they are foreign or domestic, to attack?
No, there are a number of things that are conspiring at the same time, Bishop, in my opinion. One is that you have people's mental health deteriorating and falling apart. They're becoming subject to toxic ideologies. And then if they do decide to lash out, they're going to lash out at a group that represents something in opposition to whatever toxic ideology that they've succumbed to. So that tends not to be a secular event like a football game. It's going to be a place of worship. It's going to be a religious community. Unfortunately, I do think that we're going to see more of this, not less. And there are 300 to 400 million firearms in the United States. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we have a problem that other societies don't face, is that when people fall apart, they can get a gun. But I'm going to say, not to lay it all on this, but it's significant. I'm going to lay at least some of the blame on social media. It's a lot easier to radicalize someone in an atmosphere where they can go to like a dark corner of the internet that they get led down a giant rabbit hole over time. And it's lethal, its worst forms.
Wonderful. Thank you for lending so much of your brain power to our students, to our viewers, to me. I look forward in continuing discussions and relationships with you. I hope that your people will pass off to my people a way in which you and I could talk off camera and talk directly and build that. Of
course, Bishop Jakes. We can make this a regular show. Andrew Yang and Bishop Jakes every week.
I bet you
will be a ratings bonanza.
We would get quite a few listeners. I bet you that we are the odd couple. They would not expect us to come together. So I think we should play off of that and consider creating some dialogue that is so important, that diversity, which we both represent in this country, cares and deeply loves this country. Even if you don't agree with anything that you say or I say, that we actually do love and care about the future of this country, and that we're very, very worried about the future of this country. And that really is the spirit of America, is that we care about democracy. We respect the Constitution, and we hope very much that everybody would have an opportunity to be treated equally, and we're willing to fight for it. In that we have complete solidarity. So I hope we can talk again. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, Bishop.
Take care.